Zora Neale Hurston is an American artist, playwright, and novelist. Both of her parents are former slaves, and she was born in Neale, Alabama on January 7th of 1891. Zora Neale Hurston was the fifth out of 8 siblings, and her father was a Baptist, who then became a carpenter, and her mother was a school teacher. Zora Neale Hurston was forced to move to Eatonville at the age of only 3 years old, where she then lived there until at the age of 9, where her mother had died and her father had remarried to her new stepmom. Her new stepmom and her had bad relations, and her father forced her off to a Jacksonville boarding school. She would attend school there until her father stopped paying for the school, forcing her to leave and go live with relatives in Florida. She then came across Morgan State University, where she was able to get a free high school education, and after getting her high school diploma, she went to Howard University to get her associate's degree. And after Howard University, she then transferred to Barnard. At Barnard University, she traveled the Caribbean studying anthropology. She also traveled Southern America. She was looking at the cultural influence that African Americans had. Doing this and studying anthropology earned Zora Neale Hurston the Guggenheim Award. Later, she earned her bachelor's degree from Barnard, becoming the first African American woman to earn her bachelor's degree from Barnard University. Later in her life, after ending her career, after she returned to Florida as a maid, she was tried for sexual assault on a 10-year-old. After the courts not having enough evidence, Zora Neale Hurston was let free, and all charges were dropped. Later, Zora Neale Hurston opposed the Brown v. Board of Education Supreme Court case. She opposed this case because she believed that the influx of white teachers would cause black teachers to lose their jobs, and she also believed that the cultural divide would become greater and that there might have been a conflict between the two. Later in her life, she had ended up moving to St. Lucie County, where she died in a welfare center in 1960. Zora Neale Hurston had such a huge impact on American culture because she brought attention to what African American culture in the South was, the folklore that they had practiced, as well as the gender roles and the gender gaps that were in the mid to early 1900s. In one of her most famous works, Their Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston describes a lady who bounces from husband to husband trying to find love. In the end of this book, Zora Neale Hurston describes the lady in finding love in herself, instead of finding it with another man. Another one of her famous works is just a bunch of small stories, and it's called Meals on Men. It describes the timber camps that were in North Florida, as well as the folklore that they would tell each other. In the 1940s, Zora Neale Hurston wrote Seraph on the Sewanee. It talked about the white trash culture, the construction of class, and how it was in the swampy areas of Sewanee. Another one of her famous works was a small story named Sweat. We in fact did a research project on Sweat just recently. The story of Sweat describes Delia Jones, a young lady who is stuck in an abusive relationship with her husband Sykes and can't get out of it. Delia Jones is the bread maker of the relationship and helps Sykes live his life. Sykes is always cheating on Delia, and in the end, Sykes ends up dying. Sykes was trying to play a prank on Delia, trying to show how he was the dominant male in the relationship. In the end, the prank ended up backfiring, and Sykes ended up getting bit by a rattlesnake, and Delia was left with the ironic decision to either saving Sykes or letting him die of the rattlesnake wound. In the end, in her own self-interest, Delia Jones ends up saving her own life and freeing herself from her abusive relationship with Sykes. Zora Neale Hurston's writing have such a huge impact on American culture that in Fort Pierce itself we have our own historic walk with billboards that explain the historic destinations that Zora had left. The reason that Zora has such a huge impact is because she brought attention to what the African American culture was in the South in the mid to early 1900s, as well as bringing attention to how the cultural divide would be present in today's future, possibly through her works. To close, the reason that Zora Neale Hurston is truly an influential person in today's society is because she shows how life has changed from the 1920s, the 1930s, and the 40s, from the mid to early 1900s, how the gender gaps in the male roles have changed, how it's not always the dominant males that are always in the relationship controlling, how the women have changed and are now like the working, and sometimes the women are even the breadwinners of the relationship. Zora Neale Hurston's works show us how progress has been made in America and truly shows what the American dream is about.